Welcome to the Building Your Brand Strategy session. In this session, we will hear from Kara Robinson Sabin on her lessons learned in building leading brands and discuss what it means to be a woman of color in the beauty industry, with an emphasis on unpacking the barriers we face in the industry and the actions that can be taken to overcome them. Please welcome our moderator, Americus Reed, Whitney M. Young Jr., Professor of Marketing at the Wharton School, and our keynote speaker, Kara Robinson Sabin, CEO of Sundial Brands. Join us to hear Kara's story and be inspired to continue to aim for the C-suite despite the obstacles you may face along the way.
Good afternoon, Wharton community and external world. Americus Reed here, and I am absolutely excited to have this fireside chats are awesome because you get to actually in a less formal situation sit down with a very interesting individual and have a conversation that can really provide insight. I'm really excited to be here with you today, Kara, to talk to you about all the wisdom that I can extract from that big, beautiful mind of yours in the next 45 minutes. So it's great to see you.
Thank you, Americus. I am so happy to be here. I was looking forward to this all week, so I'm really, really excited.
Excellent. So, Kara, I want to start by just kind of just stepping back just a little bit, because in some ways, you know, we're still sort of in this pandemic, this COVID-19, this next normal world. And we oftentimes, you know, I look at people out there in Zoom land or in little boxes in 2 dimensions, and we often lose sight of the nuance and the challenges, the struggles, the crises that everyone is inevitably facing here. So I just want to step back and just ask you how you're doing, Kara, and just kind of just, you know, get a little bit of an update in terms of how you're coping and how you're thriving in this situation.
Yeah, you know what? I appreciate that question because I think so often we just get straight into the business if you're on a Zoom call, but all of us have things going on in the background. So to, you know, be perfectly honest, I'm concerned about my family that's in Texas right now. So I have my dad and my stepmom and stepsister in Texas, and you know, they've been without power. You've seen everything on the news. And so trying to get them to a safe place that is COVID safe, but also has heat and power and all of that. So, you know, I think if COVID has taught us anything, it's the importance of family and not being able to be close with your family and go visit them or go help them. So that's kind of going on in the back of my mind, but everyone is good as I speak. So I'm happy about that. And yeah, you know, just, you know, taking everything day by day.
That's great to hear, Kara, because it you know, I'm going to be perfectly honest. You know, I'm struggling. I'm just I'm living hour by hour, you know, and it's like, I don't even know what the days are. You know, it's sort of like, there's only 2 types of days when packages come and days when packages don't come.
That's how you mark the time.
How you mark the time.
You know, last year, and I'm sure for you had a similar experience. Last year was extraordinarily challenging for a number of reasons. For me, I was appointed CEO of Shea Moisture in December of 2019. So just a couple of months after I took this position, we went straight into working from home with COVID. And so trying to build a team and a culture and an organization in a remote environment, but then also seeing the impact of COVID on my team, on their family members. And then in June with the death of George Floyd, and just how my team and I personally was trying to process that and also just show up for my team and be a leader, but struggling with how do I process what's happening with our people. And, you know, it has been an incredibly intense year, almost year and a half. It really has. So I think that's a very emotionally intelligent way to start this conversation because it is important.
Excellent. Well, I'm really excited to learn a lot from you, Kara. I want to step back and talk a little bit because you pointed to this, I think, which was super interesting. And it's the fact that, you know, we're in a sort of a different world right now. And we're layering on top of this, you know, a lot of social justice issues that are now salient, particularly salient in the moment, and sort of producing a kind of understanding of the necessity for a movement and more and paying attention to this stuff. And so I was reading an article that I think you penned on this notion of dismantling racism. So I want you to talk through a little bit of how that sort of exists so first of all, congratulations, CEO of Shea Moisture, one of the most incredible. I was using the brand and I love it because this is the only way I can keep this luscious skin. That's a joke. Just kidding. No, I actually do use. I do use the.
We got some beard products for you. We got everything.
I'm ready for you, Kara. So, but I talk a little bit about this because you're in a moment right now where there's some serious things happening, and on top of the normal day to day, which is challenging to run such an important, powerful, and robust brand. But then to layer on top of this the issues of dealing with racism. Can you talk a little bit about how that's affected your lens, how your approach, how that's affected maybe how you think about brand strategy, all of these things, and certainly within the context of building your team, which is also kind of an important aspect of making sure that the people inside the building are, having the correct kind of organizational development to deal with these challenges. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, I've been in working in beauty and working for over 20 years, and never in my career have I had so many conversations about race and racism. And I think that's the case for many people that are working in corporate America right now. So on one hand, while that's refreshing to be having these kinds of conversations, it is also exhausting, and it can be uncomfortable. Not so much uncomfortable for me, but uncomfortable for people that are not used to having these kinds of conversations. But I actually am welcoming this movement that we're in right now because I think it's long overdue. And leading a brand like Shea Moisture, it is. It's perfectly aligned with what we believe in and what we feel is important. And so when Shea Moisture came onto the market, there were very few options for women of color in widely available retailers, mass retailers. You had to, go somewhere special to find products for our hair and our skin. And so we, along with some other brands, really helped create what is now, the natural hair movement, where you see all of the choices and the options. But underneath that, what is really most important to us as a brand is that we lead the way to create economic equity, because we feel like that is the true path to equality, is if we can enable that. And we do that through our proceeds model. So I didn't know this before I joined Shea Moisture, quite frankly, that every single purchase of Shea Moisture, we take proceeds and reinvest them back into the community. We reinvest them into the cooperatives in Ghana, the women that work in the cooperatives in Ghana that handcraft our shea butter. And then in the United States, we are committed to investing in Black and in women of color entrepreneurs. And so there's a lot of programming that we do. And prior to the brand's acquisition from Unilever, there was a lot of work that the founders were doing, and much of that was really not widely known. And now we feel it is important that people understand that this brand and this company, we have been doing this and been committed to this for years and years and years, and why it is so important. Because I think fundamentally, to dismantle systemic racism and oppression, it has to come with economic equity.
Well, I love what you're saying here, Kara, because in some ways, it's a word that I talk about in my class all the time when consumers, and this is probably especially true right now, when there's a pandemic and we're all in our living rooms all day and we have an opportunity to sit there and navel gaze and think about, okay, what's really important in my life? And, what do I need? What do I not need in terms of products and people, all kinds of things. And so this idea I love this idea that you're talking about, which is to say that we have an authentic historical footprint of things that we haven't been out necessarily promoting, but that we've done, so that if you check, you'll actually see that when we say this is community-based, this is an ethos that's driven with the brand having a deep connection and very robust connection to our community, that's not just a bunch of lip service. And so I appreciate that, Kara, to be able to do that. But I want to ask you, like, how, in some ways I'm a marketer. So in some ways it's like, I want to tell the world about this. But how do you do that in a way that can still maintain the authenticity and the sincerity? And it's like, we're not just, we're promoting, but we're promoting with a lowercase p. So how do you talk us through that?
Yeah, you totally get that. You don't ever want to be seen as performative or profiting off of doing good. You want to do good. But with our model, we do believe that the more people that are aware of the good that we are hoping to do, that will incent them to want to be a part of our brand community. And if they are, then that enables us to do more good for the community. But the point that you made about this moment of, navel gazing and really kind of finding your purpose, for me personally, that has also happened with my career, quite frankly. And so to be able to be in a position where my personal passion and purpose and what is important to me in terms of the impact that I want to make on the community aligns with my brand purpose. Like I naively didn't even think that was possible, that I could lead a business in corporate America that has a mission that is aligned with my own personal passion. And I think when you're a person of color, and particularly if you're a Black woman in corporate America in beauty, as I look over the course of my career, I have not always had this. And so it's a big responsibility, but it is incredibly rewarding.
Interesting. I'm actually curious because you did mention Unilever. And when I think about this, I want to get your thoughts on this. You build something organic, something beautiful, something that comes from the soul. And then you build this thing up and then another company gets involved. And how do you make sure that, especially if it's a big company, a big house of brands, lots of other stuff going on, how do you make sure that as you grow strategically inside of this, larger ecosystem of resources, that you don't allow the core ethos to somehow be compromised and or lessened? Do you have any thoughts on how what that journey's been like, and from your perspective as the steward of these very amazing brands?
And that's the word right there. It's the steward. I feel an incredible amount of responsibility to be the steward of this brand, to continue the legacy that was started by the Dennis family. The way that I'm able to maintain that, I still have regular, meetings and communication with the family, and we're connected. And I speak with Richelieu often. So I think, his vision and what he has created, that I am now leading, but all of the other adventures that he's leading, I think having that connectivity to kind of make sure we're keeping ourselves honest. The other is, it depends on who that parent company is. And so Unilever is a parent company that does fully believe in purposeful brands, and that the people leading those businesses and in those brands need to also strongly believe in that. And so they recognize that there is something special and a reason why this was a good fit for Unilever, and they give us the freedom to do what we need to do. But the one thing that I do want to note that I'm not sure if people are aware, when Unilever acquired Sundial Brands and the family of brands underneath that umbrella, there was an organization called the New Voices Fund that was started. And that I really, tip my hat to Richelieu Dennis, because the terms of the sale, he required that if Unilever is to purchase this company, Unilever has to co-invest in a fund, and that fund is one of the vehicles in which we invest in other Black entrepreneurs. And so from that, through just the informal communication and relationship that I have, and then we also have some, internal boards that keep us honest to make sure that we are not losing sight. And, as long as I'm in this role, I am very clear on what the focus and what our duty is.
I love that, Kara, because in some senses, it's again, the word authenticity and the word, when you're building the brand, you're the steward of the brand. You have it is an asset, right? So you have to nurture it, you have to take care of it, you have to protect it. And I love the things that you guys are strategically doing behind the scenes. Should be a bit more in front of the scenes, I think, because you should be lauded for these wonderful things. But to make sure that those elements stay in place, because you never really want to lose sight of what it is that brought you to the party.
That's right.
But I want to get your perspective on this. I want to step back a little bit in this industry more generally, in the context of the beauty industry, and what has been some of the major things that you have seen as CEO of Shea Moisture that sort of look at trends. Because there was a big fear when COVID first hit. and even for myself, and I stopped like buying slacks. It's like the world changed. It's like, okay, am I ever going to put on nice clothes again?
Right.
And so people were a little bit worried about the beauty space because, like, okay, are people going to say, hey, I don't need these products anymore? Talk a little bit about what you saw as kind of key pivots that were happening that you kept a strategic eye on.
Yeah, so there definitely were parts of the beauty industry that have been disproportionately impacted negatively by COVID. I'd say the consumers that are part of our Shea Moisture family and in our sub market. So textured hair care is one of our biggest segments. We actually saw growth, and a lot of brands in our segment saw growth. And in the beginning of COVID, that was due to salon closures, that was due to independent beauty supply stores being closed. And so a lot of that traffic, went to other places. But then as the country started to open up in the summer and throughout the fall, that growth continued. And so I think, again, you made the point of all this time that we have at home. And so many people are experimenting. They have more time. They're trying new hairstyles. They're being a bit more indulgent in self-care because we don't necessarily have all the outlets or be able to do all the things that brought us joy or fulfillment. And so beauty, it's those simple indulgences. And so for the most part, I think that's what's been driving the growth.
So would you agree with the characterization, Kara, that that growth is partially because you also, I was reading in your article, you're very attuned to the underlying psychology and the consumer behavior that happens in your space. Has there been a transition? You use the word indulgent, which to me implies kind of like more emphasis on, I got to take care of myself. I have to, there's a zen that I have to tap into now, especially now. Right. And it's less of, well, I'm buying a particular care product because necessarily I want to look good, which maybe I do to myself because I don't see people, but talk a little bit about that shifting psychology. And that's question number one. And also point number two is it your assessment that sort of psychology is going to remain with us when all of this is over? What's going to happen on the other side of this pandemic in your space? Well,
and that's $1 million question, the second part of your question. But the first part, I think that indulgence is partly, there's a frivolity to that. But there also is so much of our lives we feel is out of control. There's so many elements that like you just can't control anything. But what you can control is a little face cream or a little eyeliner, or when you take a shower, trying a new body wash or something like that. So I think that's part of it. I do think this Zoom culture has had an impact. And so if you think about the intimacy of having meetings in Zoom, people can peer into your home and see your dog or your kid or, what kind of furniture you have or what have you. And when we were in an office setting, when I reflect back, I don't know how in tune we were with each other. We would physically be together, but there is a different level of intimacy and connectivity. And just on the surface of just, people seeing your face so up close. And so I think the psychology of all of that is at play. Now, the second part of your question is what will happen, when we're on the other side. And the reason that is a difficult question to answer, as is because we don't know what's on the other side.
That's fair.
What is the new normal, and is it going to be normal, or is it a hybrid of what we've been experiencing? But from a marketing standpoint, I think there has been greater penetration of new consumers trying new products and new brands. And you've got to believe that some of that will stick because trial can lead to repeat purchases.
Interesting. Kara, I want to get your perspective on the issue of growth, because you mentioned this earlier, and particularly in the context of, staying within the domain of some of the issues that are associated with the conference. And this notion of, being aware of the barriers and the challenges. Because I think there's kind of an interesting barrier, which is, and I want to get your perspective on this and your approach and what you think about this. But the idea that, okay, we have a very strong ethos kind of in the community. And as we try to grow, other groups might be interested in our products. How do you manage that at all? Is that something you give thought to, or you say like, if we're in a situation where our products start becoming more sort of interesting to the masses, let's say, you know, is that a challenge? Is that a problem? Is that how do you? And I'm trying to catch this from the perspective of brand dilution. Is there an issue here at all, or is it, how do you think about
no?
this?
So you very clearly are a professor because it's such a great question. Yes. So I remembered all of my marketing classes, and I went to Duke Fuqua School of Business, but I did attend Whitney Young when I was a young student. And that was one of the first things that I wanted to make sure that I tackled, was getting clear about who we are and why are we here and who are we for. And so my belief in the way that my team and I are leading this business is that we need to make sure that we are true to the founding of this business. And the founding of this business was through Black women and them being a part of building this business. Our consumer is so highly engaged, and when we do things right, they let us know, and when we get it wrong, they let us know as well. And so this brand centers Black women, and if you are in support of that, then you can be a part of our brand family as well. If you are an ally to those women, you can be a part of that as well. But I do believe from my marketing classes, I know at a certain point, you can't be all things to all people. You have to be clear about your purpose, why you're here, and who you're serving. And so we are centering Black women. And even in doing that, I think it's a myth to believe that that is a narrow focus, because we're not a monolith. There are so many subsegments within what does it mean to be a Black woman, that we think there is plenty of opportunity for us to grow by having that focus, and you know, whether it be in the United States or globally.
I love that. Here, let me say what I love about this perspective, Kara, and it's the idea that, you know, companies, when they lean in on their values, sometimes it's a little scary because they don't often have that realization that you just so poignantly pointed out, which is to say that we're not going to try to be for everybody. And in fact, we're okay if there are folks who would look at what we do and what we stand for and say, I don't stand for that, so I'm not interested in your product. So you know what I mean? So there's a kind of brilliance in that analysis, because what you're saying, by the way, I have tons of professorial friends at Fuqua, so you're obviously well trained here. But just the idea that, you know, we're okay with that. You know, it's like we're okay with the fact that we know who we are and we invite you in. It's not like we're telling you not to come into the tent. We're saying we're inviting you in, but we're okay if you choose not to come into the tent.
That's spot on. And last summer, I would get emails from consumers who were not Black consumers, not people of color, who would say that they were disappointed that we were centering Black women and that they were no longer going to buy our brand. And that's, you know, that's their option. That's their choice.
Yeah. Here's what I think this is absolutely brilliant about this. And it's a little bit of there's a little bit of, and I want to get your point of view on this as well. See if you agree with this statement, Kara. And that is the idea that there's a little bit of the decision calculus is economic and moral. So the moral decision is like, we know who we have to represent this ethos because it's an important part of the societal impact that we want to have, centering with this community. That's point number one. So that's just the right thing to do. The economic decision calculus says that when we attract people who think that the ethos that we have is in alignment with their own, whether they be persons of color or allies, they're going to come into the tent with a stronger sense of loyalty, right? Because it's no longer just about, well, here's this fantastic product and it does exactly what it says really well. It makes your skin amazing. It does that, but it also has this other side that I believe in that's important for my core values. So I'm going to, in a sense, you know, the economic calculus says, my customer lifetime value for you guys is going to be much higher than just sort of, let's say, a situation where I'm coming in because I just think the products are really good.
Right. And I would add there's a third dimension to that, which is we focus not just on creating products and putting Black influencers in our campaigns or things like that. We make sure that our ways of working, that we are walking the talk. So one example is last fall, we launched a new advertising campaign, our anthemic campaign. We made sure that the agency partners that we were working with, the music composer, the artists with whom we worked that did the illustrations and the art, I do believe that if you are trying to make an economic impact, it also has to extend to your vendors, your supply chain, your partners. You can't skip over any of that. So it's beyond the product. It's really fundamentally into your ways of working.
This is fantastic, Kara, because I try to teach in my class. I try to make the students, understand that there's a certain way to do purpose. And that way is to actually, and I want you to speak on this as well, how you manage that, the fostering, the facilitation of that purpose from within the building, because the premise is that if you don't have that organizational culture that believes in that ethos, then the chances of being able to take it to the market and have it be perceived as authentic and sincere and real is much less. So talk a little bit about your team. What are the different specific things that you do as the C-suite leader, the steward of the brand, the commander of the team, if you will, to make sure that ethos is living and breathing and real and manifest every day in what it is that you and your team are doing?
Yeah, I know that it has to start with me, and I have to model that behavior. And I have to ensure that my team understands why we are behaving this way and modeling this behavior. So an example was we're working on a project and we wanted to hire a design agency. And so we were interviewing a couple of agencies, and every agency said, oh, we believe in inclusive beauty because, that's what they think they have to say. But inevitably, when they got to the slide that said, here's our team, your team is not inclusive. And so one way to model that behavior is to insist that if you want my business and you want our money and you want this project, then you need to come to me with a team that is reflective of what is important to us as a brand. And that may mean the timeline is, a week or two late because people are scrambling or what have you. But at every step of the way, if you are going to do business with us, this is something that is just non-negotiable.
Interesting. When the principles are real, I love this, Kara, because what you're saying is when the principles are real, you eat, sleep, and breathe these things. They become kind of just part of the way that you do business. Is that what I'm hearing? Is this?
It is.
But you have to be purposeful, right? You can't let this be some exercise where we put the mission up on a PowerPoint slide. We all look at it and it's kumbaya, and then we put it away and so that we can put out the fires. I mean, it has to, how do you make it live and breathe every single day with your team? Are there exercises, activities that you do to make sure that it lives?
I think it goes back to, it is my personal passion. So it's very easy for me as a leader to lead this way. When we were still in the office, if we were having a town hall meeting and we were ordering snacks, I wanted those snacks to be from Black and women-owned bakeries or what have you, like every step of the business. And it's not, if anything, I think it's become easier to identify Black-owned brands, women of color led brands. And so there's really no excuse that, it's not acceptable to say, well, there aren't any, or I can't find a Black owned florist if you want to send flowers to someone or what have you. So, and I think the people on my team that thrive believe in that as well. And so that's how we're able to do it.
That's awesome. I think that in some senses, as we move forward, Kara, this whole argument about not an insufficient pipeline of these things, it just kind of goes out the window. Because in your point's fantastic, Kara, which is like, guys, you got to look. You have to if you care enough, you will find those opportunities to make those connections. I want to transition to some questions that our audience is interested in. So this is a question for you, Kara. How have you seen the beauty industry from a marketing and branding perspective evolve from when you began your career to now? So for example, the increasing trend of expanding shade ranges at product launches, launch of natural hair brands into big box stores or the increased diversity, for example, in advertising? Because your career is fantastic trajectory. Talk a little bit about what you've seen in terms of.
So I'd say early in my career, most of the businesses and the brands that I worked on were considered general market brands and businesses. And so as one of the only, very often the only Black people in a leadership position, the struggle was just to see representation in how we communicated to consumers. So through your campaigns, through your advertising. Social media has been a game changer because it has, we've all heard the expression, it's democratized everything. And so when I started, brands would have a one-sided conversation with consumers. And through social media, consumers were having conversations with brands and demanding that they see more inclusivity, demanding that they see less of this Western ideal standard of what is considered perfection and seeing realness and seeing authenticity. So social media has had an impact. And the other dynamic has been also related to social media is that the barrier to entry for entrepreneurs to enter beauty has been lowered. And so it used to be, it was really consolidated with, 4 or 5 global companies. And if you, those were the companies that owned the industry. And now we see entrepreneurs that, whether they come in through a social following or they have a brilliant idea or however they enter the market, it's much more democratized. Interesting.
You raise a point that I want to follow up on as well, Kara, which is this idea. I love that what you just said. Someone got to figure out how I got to take this stream and put into my class so my students can learn from your wisdom here. Yeah. This notion of moving from a one-way channel of communication to a quote unquote co-creation model. And the idea that the consumers, because of their massive social networks, and there's many, influencers, micro influencers, all that, they're part of this conversation. So talk to me, Kara, about, because sometimes I talk to folks and it makes them nervous to give up that control, to have voices in the conversation and co-development of how the brand ethos is going from the world. And sometimes there's a fear that, as an example, like the wrong sorts of negativity can find their way into the, like one of the things that just blows my mind is like whenever I'm on YouTube, I think YouTube actually might be the worst place for, toxic trolling. Yeah. You put up a video of Winnie the Pooh and then somehow 6 comments later, it's racial epithets are flying all over the place. Yeah. There's this thing of like, how do I want to make this part, I want my consumers to be part of this conversation, but I want to be careful that it doesn't go sideways in some way. So what's your thought process on approaching that particular issue?
My thought process is you can't lead from a position of fear. You're just going to fail. So social media is toxic. We all know that. YouTube, there have been things that have gone up that I've been a part of. And I was in very early in my career, I was like, oh, I shouldn't be reading those comments because they're not adding any value to my life. And if anything, it's just going to piss me off and make me have a bad day. But Twitter's the same way. Yes. I mean, but there is good that can come out of the ability to communicate via social media. But as a leader and a leadership team, you can't lead from a position of fear because it's just, you're not going to get anywhere. So you have to be, honest that this is the environment, this is this is the side effect, or this is what comes along with being a part of that. But just not leading from a position of fear is what I would say.
I love that mantra because I feel like it's it requires courage to two things. It's actually a double-sided coin in some sense because it requires courage to put that into the sort of managerial ethos, but it also requires a kind of vulnerability too, because it says, hey, I'm willing to accept that the ROI on this, if you will, is what it is, and it's worth taking whatever risks those are, in some senses. So that's really, really interesting. I really like, you can't lead from a position of fear. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt and remind myself of that. Another question from the audience, Kara, what do you believe are the key skills? And again, because you're an inspirational leader, one of the few African-American females who's running an amazing brand. So I want to make sure that my audience is and our audience here is able to be inspired by because you're making making it look easier. It's like you're like just sitting there like, yeah, I'm just, I'm sort of, I'm badass, but and I love that. But I want to tell us a little bit about what you believe, Kara, are the key skills needed to be successful in the corporate arm of a beauty brand, and how may this differ from launching a brand from scratch, let's say?
Yeah. So in my entire career, I've been in corporate America. So I've not been an entrepreneur, but I do work with many entrepreneurs in my position. But, navigating corporate America is treacherous. That's the only word that I can describe, especially if you are a woman and if you are a Black woman. We know all the statistics with the wage gap and microaggressions and all of that. And so I would say when you're trying to cultivate a career through corporate America, the emotional tax of the internal machinations of being a part of an organization and trying to do your job, you can't just do your job, you also have to manage the navigation of the conversations and all of that. I think when you're an entrepreneur, there are a whole different set of issues and complications and challenges that are widely known and have become more apparent through COVID, which is a lack of access to capital and investment. That said, one of the things that I think is so exciting about all of the entrepreneurs that are growing their businesses today is that they can shape their brands and their business in their voice with an authenticity that when you're in corporate America, you likely are working on an established brand that has been around for many, many years, has had many other leaders, and it already has a meaning for consumers. And so I think the liberation, not glossing over all of the challenges of being an entrepreneur, but to be able to build something from scratch in your vision and it's unadulterated is incredibly exciting.
Interesting. That's good stuff. Another question. Increasingly, Kara, we see launching beauty brands to fill gaps that are in the marketplace, like Briogeo and the Lip Bar. How does a natural hair pioneering trusted brand like Shea Moisture stay relevant in this increasingly competitive market? Because when I was reading your article, you mentioned that there is this interesting interface of, there's science behind this stuff, but there's also kind of art and, craftsmanship. And so how do you continue to stay relevant in terms of the competitive nature of the marketplace?
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I love beauty so much, is because it is so dynamic and competitive. And, shout out to Nancy Twine and Melissa Butler from Briogeo and Lip Bar. They are amazing women. And I welcome the competition. I think the competition leads to more choice for consumers. And through entrepreneurs like Melissa and Nancy, they are setting the path for other entrepreneurs and founders to follow in their footsteps. And in terms of Shea Moisture, what does that mean in terms of our relevance? This is, I really believe, our moment to be the best versions of ourselves, because we want to be a part of enabling that. We want to enable more competitors, quite frankly. We want to see more founders. And so we are, that is why we're here. We want to support and enable that.
That's incredible. I love that, Kara. We're pushing up a little bit on time. We got about 7 minutes left in our session here, Kara. A couple more questions I want to throw at you. One related to kind of your perspective, and the other related to, more of the strategic trends that are going to be forward looking 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the road for your brand and this market more generally. But I want to, can you share with our audience maybe some personal big learnings, big aha moments that Kara had that maybe you didn't anticipate, but that you saw as kind of important in your development, your professional and personal development? And like, what were some of those lessons?
Yeah. So this may not be the answer you're expecting, but I would say when I made the decision to go natural, that changed my life and it changed my career. And for women that have been on that journey, I think they can identify with what I'm saying. But I remember being so trepidatious about making that decision because of all of the conditioning that many of us have had over the years around what is considered professional. And if I come to work and my hair is not considered professional, will that inhibit my progress?
Mm-hmm.
And, a shout out to my sister brand Dev and our leader, AC Eggleston Bracey, and all the work that she's been doing around the Crown Act to end hair discrimination.
Right.
So for those of you, if you want to sign the petition, go sign the Crown Act to end hair discrimination. But that decision, I feel, unlocked my true authentic self because all the code switching and the things that we do without even knowing that we're doing it sometimes in corporate America and in white spaces with this skin and this hair, like it's really clear what I'm about. And so it allowed me, I think, really to step into my purpose. And so that was my biggest learning, is I wish I had been able to come to my purpose earlier in my career.
Interesting. That's a very powerful moment. I think what I try to talk with my students about is finding that moment, that calling, if you will, that connection, that synchronicity with what it is that you do and who you are. Sooner rather than later in your life. And so like trying to be self-aware about that journey. So I love that analysis. Let me turn really quickly to the more general issue in the marketplace and ask you, Kara, in terms of like, what do you see as big strategy questions in the area of moving the brand forward that Shea Moisture will face in the coming year, 2 years? And how do you approach, what are these things you're keeping an eye on? If they could be trends, issues, challenges, whatever. And how are you anticipating how you're going to be able to tackle those challenges?
Yeah. So, one of the biggest things that I think about is when the brand started decades ago and how much it changed the industry because there was complete white space. I think about what is that next frontier? So natural hair, everyone knows about natural hair. There's other brands. It's mainstream. It's available in mainstream retailers. So what is that next frontier? That's one of the things that I think about. There's often a discussion around wellness and inner and outer beauty. And so what is the way that Shea Moisture and our other brands can play in that space is something that I think about. And then the other is, growth through expansion outside of the US. And so as our identity, we're very clear on our purpose as we've been discussing. But as you go outside of the US, what does that mean? And what does it mean to have this purpose and to have this mission in a way that is relevant in Latin America, in Europe, and other parts of the world? So those are kind of the three strategic areas. And I don't have the answer. And if I did, I probably wouldn't tell you right now. But those are the things that we think about.
That's a bit of the secret sauce. And so that's interesting because in some senses, it goes back to this earlier question of growth and how to grow the right way, right? So making sure that you're growing in a way that is consistent with the ethos of what it is that you're doing and your sincerest beliefs in that context. Tell me a little bit. I want to close with this question, Kara, which is if you could look back and you were to do something different, like something that you learned, it's kind of like I think about myself, and I'm 50. And it's like, if I could talk to my 20-year-old self, what would I tell my 20-year-old self in terms of, either business related stuff or more personally? Can you share with us a little bit of that insight? Yeah.
Gosh. So I was always really good in math. And when I was in college, I thought my only career options were to go into accounting or be an actuarian or something that did not seem interesting to me. But I wish I had known about the beauty industry, and I think I would have taken a path to be a scientist and a product developer.
Interesting.
It never occurred to me that there are people that are actually making these products in a lab or sourcing natural ingredients and being a part. I love marketing. I love marketing, but being able to actually develop the products from a scientific standpoint, that's something I think I would have explored a little further.
Interesting. And what I love about that, Kara, is that the connection of, the need to have more diversity, inclusion in STEM as well, which is a nice, corresponding, almost corollary to that insight that you're providing. Kara Sabin, CEO of Shea Moisture. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'd love to sit here and talk another 3 hours with you and just pick your brain. But I really want to thank you for sharing your wisdom with us and spending some time at our 47th annual Whitney M. Young Jr. Conference. And I'm hoping that our audience got as much out of this conversation, this fireside chat, as I did. Let's make sure we connect on LinkedIn. I think I'm a second order.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
please connect with me, Kara, on LinkedIn.
It's really been my pleasure, Americus. Thank you so much. And just so honored to be a part of the 47th annual conference. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kara. We appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Up next, corporate mergers to achieve growth for tomorrow afternoon keynote.